The snow was coming down hard that Christmas Eve, thick, silent, relentless. The city had emptied, as if the world itself was asleep. But in the tallest tower on West Hanover Street, a light still burned on the 42nd floor. Inside sat Thomas Wycliffe, CEO of Larkwell Industries, worth over $600 million, owns patents, islands, and 12 cars he never drives. But that night, he sat alone. No wife, no kids, no staff, just a bottle of wine, a silver spoon stirring untouched soup, and a silence too loud to ignore below. The city lights twinkled. The world looked beautiful, peaceful, but Thomas wasn't looking at the view. His eyes were fixed on the reflection in the window, his own hollow face staring back, and then something moved behind him. Not inside the penthouse, outside on the street. 3 figures, a woman, a little boy, and a girl, maybe 9 or 10, holding a white cane, tapping gently in the snow. They were walking slowly past the building, bundled in second-hand coats, their breath misting in the cold. They stopped at the corner and looked up. Thomas leaned closer to the glass. Curious, the girl turned her head as if she could see him. She smiled. Then, out of nowhere, she waved. He flinched. How did she know he was there? Was it a trick, a coincidence? And then, her voice, clear as crystal, floated up through the still air like it had been waiting for decades to be spoken. "Want to have Christmas dinner with us?" He blinked. Did she just say? She couldn't have, but he opened the window just a little, and there she was, standing below, arms still raised, smile unwavering. "We don't have turkey or anything fancy," she said. "Just beans, cornbread, and my mum's prayers, but it's warm, and it's better than eating alone." Thomas Wycliffe, a man who once turned down a dinner invitation from the Prime Minister, felt something strange, something heavy, something human. A blind child, a stranger, in the freezing street, inviting him to something no billionaire could buy. Not a meal, not pity. Belonging Thomas Wycliffe had closed more deals than he could count, negotiated across from heads of state, billionaires, even warlords. Once he'd never felt this kind of hesitation. A little blind girl was waiting below, in the snow, with her hand still half, as if she didn't need to see his face to know he needed saving. He stared at his untouched dinner, steel-cut silverware, imported wine, truffle bisque, and not a single flavor he could taste anymore. She was still there. He stood, and for the first time in years, he left the penthouse without checking his phone. The elevator ride down felt like falling through layers of pride, of distance, of carefully curated loneliness. The lobby was empty. Even the security guard had gone home early. No one to witness this strange descent. Just the tall, cold doors, and a heartbeat that felt foreign in his chest. When the glass opened, the cold slapped him awake. The little family was still there. The mother, maybe late 30s, maybe just tired, looked startled. She hadn't expected him to come. The boy gripped his sister's hand tighter, cautious, but the girl, she smiled wider. "Told you he'd come," she whispered. Thomas took a slow step forward. He didn't know what to say, so she spoke for him. "My name's Imani. It means faith." He nodded, voice dry. "Thomas, that means twin, but I don't think you have one." She laughed. He actually smiled. Imani pointed her cane gently toward a nearby building. A small brick apartment complex, one of those places with mismatched windows and the smell of old radiators. "We live over there. 3rd floor. Mom made cornbread, and Mr. Louis from down the hall gave us a ham bone." Her mother cleared her throat. "We don't want charity. Just figured it's Christmas. Nobody should eat alone." Thomas didn't feel insulted. He felt seen, more than he had in years. "I'm not used to this," he said quietly. Imani just nodded. "Neither are we. That's why we invited you." He followed them across the street, carefully, quietly, the snow crunching beneath shoes that cost more than their rent. And as they climbed the stairs, chipped paint, creaky steps, a hallway that smelled like cinnamon and survival, Thomas realized something. He felt more human here than in every boardroom, mansion, or 5-star hotel he'd ever walked into. And when the apartment door opened, and that warm scent of beans and bread hit his face, he didn't step in like a guest. He stepped in like a man finally returning to something he never knew he was missing. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, peeling wallpaper, a flickering hallway light. But inside, it was alive, a Christmas tree made of stacked books and wrapped string lights. Hand-cut paper, snowflakes taped to the windows. A table so small it touched the wall, set for 4. On the counter, a dented pot of beans bubbled gently. A pan of golden cornbread cooled beside it, cut unevenly. There was no fancy centerpiece, but Thomas hadn't seen this much love in a room since he was a child. Imani guided him to a chair with her cane like she'd done it 1,000 times. "This one doesn't wobble. You can have it." She grinned. Her mother poured sweet tea from a reused jam jar. The boy, Elijah, set down mismatched forks. No servers, no pretense. Just family. And then Grace. Imani bowed her head and spoke with a voice too sure for someone her age. "Thank you for food. Thank you for warmth. Thank you for love we can feel, even if we can't see it. And thank you for the lonely man who showed up, 'cause sometimes the people who need family ain't the ones who ask for it." Thomas's throat tightened. He hadn't bowed his head in decades, but now, surrounded by the scent of home-cooked food and second-hand joy, he did. Dinner began. No champagne, no lobster, just beans that tasted like memory, and cornbread that broke like golden treasure. They laughed, talked, shared stories about silly neighbors, church plays, and the time Elijah got his tongue stuck to the freezer door. And when Imani asked Thomas what he did, he paused. How do you explain mergers, acquisitions, and capital flow to a blind girl eating beans with a smile that could break Wall Street? I run a company, he said. I sign papers, move numbers around. She nodded, thoughtful. That's cool, but do you make anything? The question cut deeper than she knew. He made money. He made deals, but what had he ever made that actually mattered? Imani wiped her mouth and leaned toward him. My mom says the world needs more builders and fewer bosses. Thomas laughed, but quietly, because he realized something. He hadn't built anything in years. Not a memory, not a friendship, not a moment like this. And as the snow outside turned the city silver, inside that cramped apartment, Thomas Wycliffe tasted wealth for the first time, and it wasn't his. The meal was over. Crumbs of cornbread clung to chipped plates. Elijah was asleep on the couch, curled under a patchwork quilt stitched with initials and faded years. Thomas sat quietly, hands folded, his $6,000 watch ticking, louder than it ever had in a boardroom. Across from him, Imani traced circles on the table with her finger, her head tilted like she was listening for something no one else could hear. You ever been alone on Christmas before? She asked. He hesitated, then nodded. The last 5 years. Imani didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't offer pity. She just nodded once, understanding that kind of silence in a way most grown men couldn't. Her mother came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. You know, Imani wasn't always blind. Thomas looked up. What happened? Her voice was soft but steady. No tears, no bitterness, just truth. The kind you only tell at tables that matter. When she was 5, she got real sick. Doctors misdiagnosed it, said it was nothing. By the time they found the tumor pressing on her optic nerve, it was too late. Thomas swallowed hard. Imani smiled. They told me I'd never see again. But I told them, that's okay. I already saw the people I needed to. It wasn't defiance. It was grace, wrapped in the voice of a child who had learned how to live in darkness, without letting it live in her. Her mom continued. I lost my job trying to keep up with her treatments. We lost our house. Her daddy left. She said it like she was saying the weather. But Thomas felt the room shift. That invisible wound, quiet but wide, the kind CEOs never see on reports or balance sheets. We've been here 6 years. It ain't much, but it's ours. Thomas looked around at the old furniture. The photo. On the wall, Imani with a cane, standing next to a plastic science fair trophy. He blinked. She competed. Her mother chuckled. She won twice. Built a solar oven out of a pizza box. Said if the sun can shine for free, nobody should go hungry. Imani grinned. Blind doesn't mean broken. The apartment was quiet again. Really looked. Elijah this child had lost her Imani sight, sat humming to herself, her father, tracing invisible and still managed to become the table. The light in her mother Mariah was rinsing dishes. He suddenly felt small. Sink. Not because she made him feel that way, chair, but because kindness had made him see just how far he'd spent billions fixing problems that didn't matter. Yet here, in a room patched together with hope and threadbare grace, he felt the weight of what actually needed fixing. He stood, cleared his throat gently. I wanted to say thank you for letting me be here tonight, for inviting me in. Mariah turned, warm but guarded. Wasn't anything, just a meal. He hesitated, then reached into his coat, pulled out a sleek black leather checkbook. It gleamed like a weapon. He placed it gently on the table, opened it, and began writing. Mariah's smile faded. You don't need to do that. Thomas kept writing. I do. Let me. He tore the check off, folded it, placed it on the table. It was a lot, enough to pay their rent for years, to replace every piece of furniture, to fix the leak he'd seen in the ceiling, to send Imani anywhere she wanted to go. He slid it across the table like an apology he didn't know how to say. It's not charity. Call it an investment in goodness. Imani touched the check, ran her fingers across it, felt the paper, the pen strokes, the weight of it all. She slid it back toward him. You don't have to buy this memory. You're already in it. Thomas blinked. But you need. Imani tilted her head. We needed family tonight. You gave us that. You gave us that one. Think money can top that? Mariah looked him in the eye. You came as a man, not a wallet. Don't leave as one. It hit him like cold water. All his life, money had been his language, his armor, his apology, his power. But here, money wasn't what they valued. Here, what mattered was presence, humility, the courage to sit at a table where no one needed your net worth, only your humanity. He folded the check slowly, put it back in the book, and this time he didn't feel rejected. He felt free. Imani tapped her cane softly on the floor. You can come next Christmas too. Just bring yourself. And Thomas Wycliffe, the man who once thought he had everything, nodded. Because in that moment, he understood. You can't fix people with money, but you can heal something inside yourself by being part of their world. The city hadn't changed overnight, but something inside Thomas Wycliffe had. He returned to his penthouse before dawn. The doorman greeted him like nothing had happened. The security system blinked green. The light still responded to his voice, but when he stepped inside, the silence hit different. Not heavy, just hollow. He walked through rooms he once bragged about. Marble counters, imported rugs, a fireplace that flickered via remote, and all he could think about was a chipped dinner table in a third-floor apartment, where cornbread still sat warm next to a girl who couldn't see but somehow noticed everything. He tried to work, tried to focus, but emails blurred. Spreadsheets felt empty. Even the stock alert, telling him Larkwell's shares had jumped overnight, meant nothing. That afternoon, something strange happened. His assistant buzzed through. "Mr. Wycliffe, there's a package for you. No name, no return address." He raised an eyebrow. Unusual. Almost never happened. Everything in his life was tracked, signed, screened, but curiosity won. He opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, thick, textured, handwritten in blue ink. It read, "Mr. Thomas Wycliffe, thank you for sitting at our table. You were a stranger when you knocked. You left us something more. This world needs more eyes that see without sight, and more hearts brave enough to listen. Merry Christmas." Imani, with help from Mum, he stared at the letter for a long time. It didn't say thank you for the check. Didn't ask for anything more. Didn't flatter him. It just acknowledged him, not as a title, not as a CEO, not even as a man of means, as a man who showed up in that more than any board vote or earnings call. Hit him in the chest like truth finally arriving on paper. He pinned the letter to his office wall right next to a framed certificate from Forbes that now felt hollow. Then he picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Clear my schedule. No calls, no meetings. Sir, all of it for how long? Until I build something that matters." Because now, the man who once built skyscrapers understood something sacred. If your empire doesn't feed souls, then all you've built is an empty throne. 1 year later, the snow was falling again, not as heavy, not as silent. This time it fell over a very different city, a city stirred by one quiet revolution, started in a third-floor apartment with a broken heater and a soul too bright to dim. Thomas Wycliffe stood in a new building, not a tower, a community center, the Imani Foundation for Vision and Voice. It stood on land that had once been slated for luxury condos. Thomas bought it quietly, without press, then donated it back to the neighborhood under one condition, that it become a place where forgotten voices were heard first. Inside, classrooms, coding labs, braille printers, and a giant wall painted with a single sentence: "Blind doesn't mean broken." Below it, a quote from Imani's Grace that Christmas night: "Thank you for love we can feel, even if we can't see it." She was there, of course. Imani stood at the ribbon with her white cane, her little brother in one hand, and the scissors in the other. When asked how she felt, she said, "Warm, even outside. 'Cause now we're not just surviving, we're building." Thomas stood behind her, no speeches, no suit, just jeans, gloves, and tired eyes full of something unfamiliar: peace. Reporters asked if this was part of some PR strategy. He didn't answer. They asked if he was retiring. He just said, "I'm finally working on something worth failing for." And he meant it, because since that Christmas night, he'd changed the company, sold off pieces, rebuilt teams, launched programs for underprivileged students and parents re-entering the workforce. He even started a mentorship series, the table sessions where CEOs and janitors sat side by side, sharing meals, no name tags allowed. And every year, on Christmas Eve, he dined with the family that changed him. Not in a penthouse, not in a mansion, in that same tiny apartment. No press, no photos, just beans, cornbread, a prayer, and a seat that never wobbled, because Thomas Wycliffe finally understood: you don't measure wealth in dollars, you measure it in moments, where your presence becomes someone else's peace. And all it took was one blind girl, who didn't need to see his face to know his heart was starving.